Good morning. Welcome to part two of Local 237's Mayoral Candidate Forum. And our first candidate for today is Shaun Donovan. Shaun Donovan, welcome.
Greg, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for having me on. It's good to see all of you.
Very good. Now, we want you to introduce yourself, tell us the qualifications, and give us your opening remarks and whatever else you want to tell us about yourself. Okay.
Thanks so much, Greg. I believe I am the right candidate at this moment to lead the city of New York for three reasons. I have the deepest, broadest experience in moments of crisis like we're facing today. I have the biggest, boldest ideas for the future of this city that we love. And I have experience at all levels of government that can translate those ideas into reality for New Yorkers. I became a public servant because I grew up in this city at a different time of crisis. As a child, I saw homelessness exploding on our streets. I saw neighborhoods crumbling to the ground, and it lit a fire in me to go to work on behalf of this city that I love. I started partnering with community leaders like Bishop Johnny Ray Youngblood and so many others across this city to rebuild those same neighborhoods I'd seen burning as a kid. That began a 30-year career on the front lines of housing and homelessness, of economic and racial justice. And that career taught me what it means to lead through crisis. I was housing commissioner in this city in the wake of 9/11. When the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes hit this city and the country, stealing half of black and brown wealth, President Obama asked me to lead our recovery from that crisis. When Sandy hit our shores and my neighbors in Brooklyn lost their homes, their businesses, some even lost their lives, President Obama asked me to lead the entire federal recovery effort. And because I guess no good deed goes unpunished, he then asked me to lead the $4 trillion federal budget, and just weeks later, Ebola emerged. And I was sitting side by side in the Situation Room with Dr. Fauci, with our military leaders, with President Obama, and then Vice President Biden, making sure an emerging global health threat didn't become a pandemic that cost tens of thousands of New Yorkers their lives. I know what it means to lead through crisis like nobody else in this race. And those moments of crisis has taught me that we need to partner every step along the way with our essential workers, our heroes in this city. And that's what I've done at every step of the way. As housing commissioner, I struck a landmark deal with our building service workers to pay prevailing wage for the first time in history in this city. I worked with Lillian Roberts and Henry Garrido and so many others to create a landmark municipal employee housing program. When I went to be HUD secretary, I dramatically increased enforcement of Davis-Bacon so that we paid prevailing wages across this country for building affordable housing. And as budget director, I worked closely with all the union leaders in Washington to make sure that we got card check done. We saved failing pension funds, and we brought jobs back into government through high road contracting that set real high standards for contracting in federal government and in-source jobs, not outsource them. So every step along the way, I have been a leader on partnering with unions and making sure that working people in this city, particularly our municipal workers, are getting not just the pay, but the benefits and the respect that they deserve, that you all deserve. So I believe I'm a unique candidate to repair and rebuild this city, but also to reimagine it as a city that works for everyone. I'm excited to be here today. I would love your support, and I look forward to a conversation. Thank you. Greg, you're on mute. The quote of 2020 and 2021, right?
Thank you, thank you. What is your campaign filing as of the last filing, your campaign contributions?
So I have raised about $4 million. And because I started a year ago in February, I have raised more than anyone else in this entire race this past year that is participating in the matching system. As you know, Ray McGuire has raised money outside of that system. But of those who are participating, including Andrew Yang, Scott Stringer, Eric Adams, I've raised more than anybody else this past year that's participating in the matching system.
Okay. All right. So we have, I believe we have 3 questions for you and maybe some dialogue. Our first presenter.
Our first question will come from Charlie.
Charlie Cotto.
Good morning, Mr. Donovan.
Morning, Charlie. Good to see you.
237. So my question is, with what's going on nationwide with the incidents involving police brutality, there's been a call to defund the police. In New York City, that call has resulted in the city council, Mayor de Blasio, and public advocate Jumaane Williams pushing for legislation that not only transfers school safety agents from NYPD to DOE, but also removes them from public schools entirely. Now, we have about 5,000 school safety agents, 90% of them of color, 70% are women. They are unarmed. Many of them live in the communities where they work. We're living in very turbulent and violent times. The school shootings in Sandy Hook and Parkland can happen here. When parents learned about the city's council plans to remove school safety, we have over 20,000 signed petitions to protest. What do you see as the solution to protecting more than 1 million public school students, teachers, and staff, while also restoring the good name of school safety agents who have been demonized, demoralized by the city council, the mayor, and public advocate?
So, Charlie, let me first say broadly that I have a plan that would create both safety and respect for Black and brown communities across this city. And it is based on my work as a leader on President Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force, working with police leaders like Chuck Ramsey, who was the African-American police chief of Philadelphia, and made real reforms in creating respect while still dramatically bringing down crime. And I'm the only candidate in this race that actually has experience working across this city and across this country on these issues that can balance safety and respect. And I do believe, from everything that I know, from my conversations with Greg and others around this city, that we do need to make changes. I am particularly concerned that those school safety officers need greater training and to understand the underlying mental health and other challenges of so many children, particularly after this year. And so what I've proposed is to create a position called a PPAR, a Positivity, Participation, and Respect Coordinators, that would allow the current school safety officers to keep their jobs and get the training and the other steps they need to ensure they're fully enabled to do their job. And I know you've proposed more training, more investment in those workers as well. I'm open to who they report to. That is something I'd love to discuss more with you, given the city council legislation, how we do that. But I do think we need change, and we need to build more supports for our students, particularly given the mental health and emotional challenges of this past year. I would also say I've proposed to make a significant increase in investment in reducing crime and violence more broadly throughout the city. When I was housing commissioner, in addition to the work that I did with our municipal employees on housing, on paying prevailing wage, I also used my housing vouchers for folks coming out of Rikers that dramatically reduced recidivism and violence and ensured that folks weren't getting involved with the criminal justice system. So those are all proposals that are part of my plans.
Shaun, two questions. One, do you have children in the New York City public school system? And two, how many school safety agents have you spoken to, or parents, or about your proposals?
So, Greg, I am lucky, I will say, for this past year to have college-age boys who are not in school anymore. It's been a brutal year, as you know, but I will say for my education proposals, we have brought together students, parents, teachers, and school safety agents. I think you know that, and Amelia Adams is on the phone, that I've actually spent a great deal of time talking to Mr. Adams, even in his apartment, about these issues as well. And so I do believe I've engaged, and I would love to have further conversations with you about this. It's critical that we engage with everyone on these.
Okay. No, well, listen, the training proposal is good. Now, what we want to know, do you support school safety staying with the police department or going to the Department of Education, or you haven't made a decision?
I have not explicitly decided on that in my proposal, and as I said, I'm open to having conversations with you.
Okay, fair enough. We have our second presenter.
My name is Ken Roper, business agent, Teamsters Local 237. Good morning, Mr. Donovan. Thank you for joining our platform.
Great to see you, Ken.
All right, my question is, New York City has some of the oldest public housing buildings in the nation. The dire need for capital repairs has led to previous administrations to come up with plans that involve private developers. NYCHA residents are concerned about gentrification. For Local 237 members, privatization could lead to job losses, relocations, and other PLA concerns. A new plan called the Blueprint for Change, which follows a public-private partnership based on a model used in Cambridge, Massachusetts, is currently being advanced by NYCHA CEO Greg Russ. What's your opinion of this plan, and do you have any other plan for NYCHA?
So, Ken, I am supportive of the Preservation Trust. And in fact, I worked with Greg Russ as HUD Secretary on that plan in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I know these issues and have worked on them more closely than anyone else in this race. And I want to be clear, I fundamentally understand better than anyone else that public housing is our single most precious affordable housing resource in this city. More folks live in NYCHA than live in Atlanta, Georgia, and more union members live in NYCHA than anywhere else in this city. And so we fundamentally have to treat public housing with the respect it deserves. On day one, I would bring public housing fully into my housing plan for the first time in the city's history. I would create a single deputy mayor that has responsibility over all of it. And I have the only specific plan of how to get to $40 billion that we need. And I would do that by keeping public housing public, by ensuring that we are not privatizing it. And I want to be clear, I created the tools, working with leaders like Greg Russ and others, that make it possible to bring $40 billion. $30 billion of that would come from Section 8 resources, as is proposed in the Preservation Trust. That's part of NYCHA 2.0 that you just described. Another $2 billion per year of city capital, I would commit more than any other candidate, $2 billion of city capital each year for NYCHA. And then third, we have a huge opportunity as we bring the systems into the 21st century, the plumbing, the electrical, the heating, all of that. We need to invest in solar on the rooftops, much more energy efficient systems. And guess what? We can create union jobs, union apprenticeship programs to do all that work. So not only would this fix NYCHA, it would create tens of thousands of jobs around the city for Black and brown folks who have been shut out too long through partnerships with you and the other unions, and the maintenance and other training, the other jobs that we would create through that would grow your ranks and make 237 even more, have even greater reach and more members. So all of that is part of my plan, which is the most specific and far-reaching of any of the candidates in the race.
And I kind of figured that might be your answer after I heard the question, because Shaun, being very modest, was the HUD secretary when this plan was enacted. So he knows it chapter and verse, and he understands fully what it can do.
That's exactly right, Greg. And I also understand that RAD can be used without privatization. That's something that Greg knows. I worked with not only Greg, but the other most innovative leaders around the country. And Greg, you know this. We sat down and you participated in a session I did. We brought together hundreds of leaders who've done innovative things, keeping public housing public around the country. And we brought residents together. We brought your members. And we actually showed that there is a pathway forward, and that was part of the thing that led to the Preservation Trust proposal that Greg is now proposing. And so you're absolutely right, and that was a partnership that you contributed enormously to, Greg, with your work and your understanding. You told me, I remember, how you'd visited in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and really understood how this can work. And as mayor, we could partner and actually get this done. Lots of people talk the talk on this. I've actually walked the walk.
Yeah, we made 4 trips there, and we took residents, and we took a member of the city council who's cowering after their visit because it seems to be unpopular. I told that person, you saw the work. We didn't take you up there to cower. We took you up there so you could be a witness to the work and what could be possible in the future for New York City public housing. But people are who they are, so you understand that.
Well, I'm a public servant who makes hard decisions and gets tough things done.
Yes. Okay, and I believe we have one last question and discussion. Gene Stokes.
Good morning, Mr. Donovan. Thank you for taking my question. I'm Director here of Membership here at Local 237. It's been a year since the first recorded death in New York City due to COVID-19, with over 30,000 deaths, followed with unemployment at a record high, businesses, healthcare, and housing market all in turmoil. What is your short and long-term goals for our recovery?
Well, Gene, first of all, great to see you. Thank you for the question. Look, I said a moment ago that I've actually walked the walk, not just talked the talk on these issues. And nobody else in this race has sat side by side with President Biden, with President Obama, with Dr. Fauci, actually solving a pandemic. Ebola, Zika, I had to do it over and over again. No one else has led this city back from Sandy or the mortgage crisis that stole half of Black and brown wealth. So I am the only one in this race who really has deep experience in moments like New York is facing today. First of all, what we have to do is make sure everyone is safe and healthy. And that begins with making sure that our essential workers are vaccinated. How can it be that Black and brown people are dramatically behind in being able to get vaccines? And I know, because I started working 30 years ago in the South Bronx, in Brownsville, in East New York, with East Brooklyn congregations and so many others. I have the relationships with trusted messengers, trusted groups in those communities that have been left behind. And I would have had mobile vaccination sites, going to community rooms in public housing, going to churches, going everywhere where your members are to ensure that we were vaccinating immediately. I would have set aside a substantial portion of the vaccines for that, rather than having all of them available just through these online sites that are, frankly, racist in terms of who can get access. That would be the first thing. Second thing, I would go to Washington and actually get the help that we deserve in this city. Again, some candidates will say, well, I've got the cell phone of President Biden. Those folks haven't sat in the Situation Room with President Biden or Vice President Harris, who I worked with very closely on the mortgage crisis. Almost every single senior official is a close friend. The person running the COVID response team for President Biden is a good friend of mine and colleague. My health lead went to work on that COVID team. So nobody else is in a position to help New York City get its fair share of vaccines. And I don't know if you know this, Gene, New York sends $23 billion more to Washington each year than we get back in return. I'm the only one who can actually go to Washington and get the money that we deserve. I know where the bodies are buried at DC. I ran the $4 trillion federal budget. I'm the only one who really has the ability to go get the vaccines and the help that we need. The third thing I would say is I not only have that national experience, I have the local experience to understand how to get our restaurants, our small businesses, our folks back to work safely. When COVID hit, I actually raised over $1 million, got restaurants cooking in neighborhoods, developed an app on a phone so that people could order hot, fresh emergency meals delivered directly to their door in public housing and so many other places. Those are the kinds of solutions I can develop that'll get our folks working again and get this city open again much more quickly than anybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Shaun, do you have closing remarks for us?
So, Greg, I hope you've heard, as I said at the outset, that I am the only candidate with the deep experience in crisis, the big, bold ideas to make sure that this city recovers and is reimagined as a city that works for everyone, as well as the experience at all levels of government to turn those ideas into reality. I would love your support, and with your support, we can save public housing. We can preserve the jobs of your school safety agents, and we can make sure that we are building true opportunity in this city. And I want to end with just a few of those ideas that would make sure this is a city that works for everyone. On the day I announced my campaign at Villa Verde in the South Bronx, which I helped create, I said that I would be the first mayor in our history to have a chief equity officer reporting directly to me, ensuring that every single New Yorker is part of this recovery. I said I would create 15-minute neighborhoods, which means that every New Yorker would have within 15 minutes of their door a great public school for their kids, a great job or transportation that gets them there quickly, but also the healthcare that they need to get vaccinated, to get tested, all of the healthcare infrastructure in every neighborhood that we need, and the fresh food, the parks, all of the things, the underlying issues that cause disproportionate sickness and death in Black and brown communities. I know that right now, the single most likely predictor of a child's life chances, even their life expectancy, is the zip code they grow up in. And that's wrong. We're going to end that in New York. And part of the way we're going to end it, lastly, is through my equity bonds proposal. Every child born in this city would get $1,000 placed into an account. And every year, depending on income, another up to $2,000. By the time a child born into poverty graduated high school, they would have almost $50,000 in the bank to be able to go to college, to start a business, to buy a home. I learned 30 years ago working with Bishop Johnny Ray Youngblood on the Nehemiah homes, more than 5,000 homes that folks moving out of public housing, your members, were able to buy. That has built wealth that will not only change their lives, but their children and their grandchildren. My equity bonds proposal would create true equity in this city by ensuring that every New Yorker has the chance to build a future here. That's who I've been in my public service career. That's who I've been working with you on public housing and so many other things. And that's who I would be as mayor. So thank you for having me. I would love to have your support and look forward to talking again soon, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you, Shaun. So Scott, welcome, and thank you for participating in our forum for Mayor of New York City. We know you're a long time You have a career. We want you to give us your background, give us your vision, give us your opening remarks, tell us everything you want us to know about your race, your candidacy, and then we have a few questions for you.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. And I'm really excited to talk about this campaign and the city. Let me start out by looking at some of the challenges this city faces. We have three crises at the same time. We have an economic crisis, we have a health crisis, we have a social justice crisis. And I'm running for mayor because I believe I have the vision and experience to meet these challenges, and I'm literally ready on day one to bring our city back. We have been through these crises before in our city's history. We had the fiscal crisis, we had 9/11, we had Hurricane Sandy. And I know that the Teamsters have always led the way to build our city back from these crises. And I'm going to honor your work and ensure that no worker has to fight back alone. It's going to take real government and political skills to get things done. And no one in this race has my experience. In every office, as assemblyman, as borough president, as controller, I have used every power I have to help unions and working people across this city, and I've partnered with you time and time again. We've worked together on NYCHA because we can't reopen the economy or rebuild the middle class without it. And for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Washington Heights back in the day. I grew up not far from Dyckman houses. And as controller, I have audited the management at NYCHA 15 times, more than all previous controllers. And what I've uncovered time and time again is mismanagement. The bureaucrats, if the bureaucrats were listening to the workers in this unit and this tenants, the whole system would be in a much better place. And that's what I've done as controller. I've actually called this union, called your union leader, and asked for advice on these issues. And that's what I'm going to do as mayor, because we've got to partner together to make sure that NYCHA stands strong. And the same thing is true with our school safety. I'm proud to stand with you as controller. When you sued the city in 2014, Greg, you sued to ensure pay equity for school safety agents because they do essential work. And I stood with you, and I stand with you today. You know, I'm the only mayor who takes their kid to school now, public school. And when I drop off my son, Max, I know he's in good hands because of the men and women who keep his school safe. You know, the school safety officer in our school is out there watching the kids get sanitized, watching to make sure that the temperatures are working, making sure that every kid goes in to the school with a hello and a good morning. And that's how I say goodbye. So I see what you do every single day. And I also want to mention to everybody that I've been working with Greg on all of these issues for a long time. We've discussed how to make the most supportive environments for our entire community, including kids, school safety agents, and our teachers. And that is what we have to do. But part of getting the work done is to make sure that we work with the union. And in the assembly, I worked with you. As borough president, I worked with you. As controller, I'm proud to tell you that your pensions are secure. Because of your trustees and because of Greg, we have delivered on the retirement security of every single man and woman in this union. Our work has delivered an average of 9% returns since I've been in office, and we have hit 14% just last year. We now have a $240 billion pension fund, and it's not there for private interests. It's for the members. And under my watch, everybody gets the check on time. I want you to know that I'm going to be the mayor you can trust during good times and bad. I will protect workers. I will deliver a fair budget for workers, and I'm going to bring back this city, starting with our small businesses. I'm going to reopen our economy and make our city more fair and just for everyone. You know, my mom passed away from COVID in April, and I remember when she passed away at a Bronx hospital. And we talked with the doctor that night, who said to me, look, the people who are dying of COVID are people in their 40s and 50s. They're black and brown. They're people who have not benefited from city government. They have been left on their own. And you got to stop that. You got to change that. And that is what I'm going to dedicate my administration, and that's what it's going to be about, making sure that we help the struggling New Yorkers who need real management and real experience. I'll reset the relationship in Albany. No one's going to steal my lunch money. As borough president, I know the value of community-based planning and listening to NYCHA residents. That is going to happen. And as controller, nobody has the financial experience, the understanding of the budgets and the agencies to redirect the resources we need. By the way, this is all about who has the best ability to do this on day one, and who has the best housing plan and NYCHA plan, because let's face it, Washington has ignored NYCHA, Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, and let's call it out. And I hope we can talk about my NYCHA plan today. Greg, thanks for giving me this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Our first question will be coming from Derek Jackson. Unmute yourself.
Derek, you are unmuted and ready to go.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Stringer.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, Mr. Stringer. My name is Derek Jackson. I'm the director of the Law Enforcement Division for Local 237. I've met you several times, sir. You've already answered a lot of information on school safety, but I'd like to have you go more in detail. As you know, there is a nationwide reaction to incidents of police brutality that has been a call to defund the police. In New York City, that call has resulted in the city council, Mayor de Blasio, and Public Advocate Williams pushing for legislation that not only transfers school agents from the NYPD to the DOE, but also removes them from public schools entirely. As we all know, there are more than 5,000 school safety agents. 90% of them are people of color. 70% of them are women. They are unarmed, but they still do an extremely amazing job, like responding to terrorist acts at Stuyvesant High School, where they came outside a few years ago and brought students back inside. Grand Street campus, where there were shootings outside in the street, but our agents do not have vests or firearms, but they put themselves in harm's way and go out and defend and take care of our children. They live in the communities where they work. These are very turbulent and violent times that we are in. The school shootings at Sandy Hook, Parkland, Columbine, all of those things could happen here. And really one of the reasons why they have not is because of the hard work of school safety agents. When the parents learned about the council's plan to remove school safety agents from the NYPD, the parents are outraged, and now more than 20,000 have signed a petition to protest against this removal. What do you see, sir, as the solution to protecting more than 1 million public school students, teachers, and other educational personnel, while also restoring the good name of school safety agents who have been demonized and demoralized by the city council, the mayor, and the public advocate? I'm also, sir, very sorry to hear about the loss of your mom from COVID. And I think it's also important to note that 15 active school safety agents have also passed from COVID while they're out there in the field. Mr. Stringer, please, your comments.
Well, I think I made it very clear that the role of school safety officers are very important to the school system. Look, I see the school safety officer every day outside, watching the streets and watching the children. Look, I think that there is a legitimate and important role. I don't think that changing the name on the door, moving school safety agents around from the DOE to the police department back and forth to satisfy, the politics of the moment, that's not the solution. We really want to make schools safe. Part of what we have to do is invest in guidance counselors and also invest in teaching assistants, making sure that our kids are getting the mental health initiatives they're going to need. We're not asking school safety officers to become the mental health counselor. We need to invest more resources in the schools. And that is how I would approach my plan for education. But I think I've made it very clear where I stand, and I'm going to continue to look at how we build a school system that is safe, that gives kids of all different backgrounds and all different zip codes the education that they need. Look, I'm a public school kid. I got kids in the public school. My mom was a former teacher. I know the system inside out because I've worked not just at a time when I wanted to become mayor, but I've worked with the school system for the last 30 years. I've seen the challenges. I've seen the great work of teachers and school safety officers, the people who make sure our kids are safe. Think about this. You drop off your kid to a school. We expect the school to educate the kid, feed your child, take care of any problem that the child has, and watch out for that child. That is the most important work that you do. And we should appreciate it and understand that it is hard work. Now, do I think the first thing we should do when there is a school incident is to call outside police officers with guns to come into schools? No, that doesn't work, because if you think about the data that we know, 63% of girls who are arrested are African American, 3% are white. So what we want to do is have a system that doesn't bring outside police, but rather resolve some issues within the school system. And when we do that, we protect our kids as well.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Our second presenter. Second question.
Scott. Good morning, Scott. I'm Sarah Wagner. I'm happy
Hi,
to
Sarah.
oblige your question about New York City Housing Authority, because I have one. I'm a lawyer at Local 237. New York City has some of the oldest public housing buildings in the nation. The dire need for capital repairs has led previous administrations to come up with plans that involve private developers. NYCHA residents are concerned about gentrification, and for Local 237 members, privatization could lead to job losses. First day with my new mouth. Could lead to job losses, relocation, and other labor agreement concerns. A new plan called the Blueprint for Change follows a public-private partnership based on a model used in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and is currently being advanced by NYCHA CEO Greg Russ. What is your opinion of this plan, and do you have any other plan for NYCHA?
First of all, I come from the view that public housing is public housing, and it's the best kind of housing. NYCHA was built by Mayor LaGuardia. First public housing was in 1938. If you got a public housing apartment back then, you were on your way to the middle class. And that has been the great tradition of NYCHA. That's how I grew up, near Dykeman houses, with kids from all over the neighborhood. Union jobs were part of NYCHA because union members lived in NYCHA. I know that firsthand. That's how I grew up in my neighborhood. But over the years, there has been tremendous divestment from the dream of NYCHA. The federal government has basically thrown up its hands and said, we're not going to invest in NYCHA. And as a result, we now need $40 billion in funding to bring NYCHA back from what I think could be an almost collapse of the system. I've done the audits, 15 of them. I know where the broken windows are, the dark staircases, the fact that the management of NYCHA can't run a 2-car funeral. We should own up to that. But look, we need to do a couple of things specifically, and this is what I'll do for mayor. First and foremost, I'm going to call Joe Biden the morning I'm elected, and I'm going to ask to come see him in Washington. And I'm going to say it's time to start getting HUD and the federal government back into the business of public housing. And we're going to ask for that $40 billion we're owed. And I'm going to lead a public-private agenda to go and campaign in Washington. You know, the great thing about getting elected mayor is you really can get anyone on the phone, and I'm going to do that. But I'm also not going to wait for the federal government to act. I'm going to commit $1.5 billion in capital funding from the city budget. I will go to Albany and get a $1.5 billion match. I will use stimulus money as well to create a financial package to do the work that NYCHA needs done, and to make sure that NYCHA is being managed not from some bureaucrat's agency, but we're going to move NYCHA into City Hall finally and give it the respect and the management. I'm going to work with Greg in this union to identify how we can help you do your jobs better. Instead of separating you from the decision making, we're going to empower you. And we're also going to make sure that we find new revenue streams for NYCHA. One of the proposals I've made as controller is moving excess Battery Park City money, $40 million over 10 years, to NYCHA repairs right now. The mayor, the governor, the controller can vote to do that. That would allow us to bond that money. So I believe that we need to come up with a state, city, Battery Park City financial package. We have got to go to Albany to get the repairs. But then what do we do? we're going to have to manage the hell out of NYCHA. We're going to have to make sure that there is a timeline for buildings to get the repairs and get the resources they need. Your workers, your union is ready to go. But for too often, we've seen audit after audit where the membership of this union is not listened to. And that's why I've built a very strong collaboration with Greg in this union, because I know that the answer to NYCHA is collaboration, discussion. But no one has more experience in this campaign as a candidate for mayor than I do about NYCHA. I know NYCHA throughout my entire 30 career, and also I've done the investigations. I've done the audits. I've looked at lead paint. I've looked at the boilers. I've looked at the lack of resources. I can go into City Hall on day one, call Greg, bring the leadership into City Hall, and literally start going building by building with a real management plan that will finally bring NYCHA back to the aspirational housing it is.
Okay. And we have a third presenter.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. Good morning, Controller. My name is John Gallagher. I'm a Long Island business agent and a member of Local 237 for 35 years. Thank you for a very long public service career, and congratulations on your signature delivery Wednesday, because a great deal of volunteering goes into that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My question is, what is your vision for New York City going forward in pandemic recovery?
I think we have to address the three crises I've outlined. First and foremost, we can't bring the economy back the same way we closed it. For so many working families who are frontline workers, union households, this pandemic showed the real inequity in our city. The lack of investment in communities of color, the lack of investment in terms of fixing the health disparities in our city. I'm going to upend the status quo when I'm mayor. We're going to direct budgets and resources to communities that have been hardest by COVID. Look, think about this. When the unemployment rate went from 3.4%, 20% in the first 30 days of COVID, it wasn't Wall Street that was hemorrhaging. It was the backbone of the city, the people in the city. Wall Street made $38 billion in profit during the pandemic. But the people who got sick, the people who passed away, were the frontline workers, the people who got on the train every morning and did the work of the people, the city workers. And when it came time to balance the budget during a pandemic, the mayor of this city stepped up and told us what his priorities were. End summer jobs for our young people and threatened to lay off 34,000 city workers. The city controller stepped up with data and said, no, you do not fight a pandemic by going after the most vulnerable. And we have to open this economy to protect the most vulnerable. And when you look at what I've put forward in terms of a jobs plan, in terms of a recovery plan, it is full on about equity. It's about leveling the playing field. It's about making sure that New York comes back differently. And let's talk about those health disparities, because the truth of the matter is the communities that got devastated by COVID was because of the land use and zoning decisions made by government over the last 30, 40 years. Where do you think all the dirty bus depot stations were placed? They were placed in communities of color. Where was the peaker plants sited? In communities of color. What did that do? It created unhealthy neighborhoods. Did government care about that? No, because we were managing people's illnesses. And you know what? We were getting away with it, this government, for a very long time. And then COVID came, sir, and said, no, this virus goes after the most vulnerable. We saw it in the Bronx. We saw it in Staten Island. We saw it in Brooklyn and Queens. And we need a mayor who understands how we're going to redirect services for our children, for our seniors, how we're going to look at budgets and the wasted bureaucracy. Let's take the Department of Education for a second. How we're going to move that money into mental health services for our children. How we're going to move money into classrooms and schools. How we're going to fix ventilation systems so that your workers are safe, as well as teachers and our kids. This has got to be a whole new way of thinking about reimagining a healthy city and an economy where only some have done well and most have suffered.
Scott, can you tell us, as of your last filing, your last financial filing, how much you have on hand in your campaign account?
Yes. So getting into the nitty gritty of the campaign. So I've raised, as of a few weeks ago, $9.1 million. I got $8 million in the bank, and I got it ready for the last 3 months of the campaign. I anticipate Greg being able to raise $10.5 million, which will give us one of the highest amounts of money going into the last few weeks of the campaign. I've built a very strong coalition of elected officials, the most diverse coalition of labor and our elected officials from all over the community. In fact, our endorsements now overlay 57% of the city. We're going to have enough money to communicate my vision for the city. And what I think people want and want to hear from me about is who's the mayor who can be ready on day one. This is not a mayoralty for training wheels. This is not a mayoralty for someone to have it as a consolation prize, or for someone who's been away for a decade to suddenly come back and say, this is a nice job. This is serious business. You have to have the pre-existing relationships. You have to have the ability to build a good team around you. One of the things I'm most proud of, Greg, in addition to raising this money, is the team that has worked with you. It's the best team in city government, and it's the most diverse team. So I have to showcase these issues, talk about our record on MWBEs and how we took on this administration. I think people do not want a third term of de Blasio, and they don't want another status quo mayor. I think they want experience, but I think they want someone they believe that can protect union jobs, create 100,000 new jobs, but also build the real affordable housing that we need for our people, and who can actually educate our kids with mental health services they're going to need, and stop playing the political games and actually get to work and get things done.
Can you briefly tell us what unions are supporting you as of today, and give me two high profile endorsements?
All right, let's see. So RWDSU with me. CWA.
Is that
Stuart Applebaum? Yes. Okay. RWDSU with me. CWA, the entire CWA is with me. The New York State laborers have endorsed me. The New York City building trades have endorsed me. Local 3, I believe, reaffirmed that this week. That's going to add to the group. And in terms of high-profile endorsements, we have Congressman Adriano Espaillat. The Dominican Latino vote is going to be important. Many people know that I have an extended Puerto Rican family, but we've also got tremendous endorsements in the Latino community, from Espaillat, from Amanda Septimo, from Julia Salazar. It runs the gamut between the next generation young elected officials to the ones who have been there. Obviously, Congressman Jerry Nadler has been with me as well, and we continue to build those endorsements. Greg, they're very diverse. They're from all 5 boroughs, and we continue to roll out these endorsements, in the interim.
Thank you. And
but by the way, the way you win this election is by getting this endorsement. Teamsters win elections. So I'm not going to sit until if I can bring this home. I know the power of this union.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind remarks, and thank you for participating. Can you give us closing remarks?
Well, first of all, let me say this. I have enjoyed our relationship together. We have been partners, both in terms of protecting the retirement security of the union members. We have also worked to hold management accountable to the issues impacting NYCHA tenants and also the workers at NYCHA. And I think there's something lost in translation when it came to this administration and the truth and understanding of the work that all of you do to keep NYCHA residents safe and keep our kids safe. This mayoralty, if I win, will be a mayoralty of partnership with you. I have demonstrated a 30-year record of being part of the union labor movement, protecting working people, fighting to make sure that this city is for everybody. And I would be honored to have your support, as I have in the past, because when we build a labor progressive coalition, when we make sure that we can fight for the middle class and those aspiring to get there, this is a winning formula to govern as mayor. And I have every intention of winning this race. As I mentioned, we have the resources, we have the broadest base of support, and obviously this union is critical to anyone who thinks they can be elected mayor.
Thank you. And thank you for participating.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Like Andrew just joined.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Greg. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And what we like to like for you to do is we like you to introduce yourself, give us your background, why you're running for mayor, and then we'll have a few questions for you.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I'm Andrew Yang. I'm running for mayor because our city is badly wounded. We're in the midst of an historic crisis, and I think I can get us out of this crisis faster than anyone else who's running. So my background, most of you probably met me when I ran for president. What most people don't realize is that prior to running for president, I started and ran a nonprofit called Venture for America that was trying to create jobs around the country. And the reason I started Venture for America is that I saw that our economy was turning on more and more people, was becoming more and more inhuman, was going to eventually push a lot of people to the side. And so I championed a humanization of the economy that would start with putting buying power into people's hands. And a lot of what you all do for your members is actually quite similar, where what you do is you go to employers, you fight for what's right for workers, and then you see to it that people are getting more of the value that they deserve, and that they have a secure middle class income with appropriate benefits. I know that without your organization, the way of life for all of your members would be significantly, it would be disastrous. People would be getting exploited right and left. So I spent 6.5 years running a nonprofit that tried to create economic activity, and then I spent years running for president trying to humanize the economy. And now I'm running for mayor, number one, to restart our economy. The fact is, we're not going to be able to get anything done if we're still missing 60 million tourists, 84% of commuters, 600,000 jobs. And job number one, in my view, is getting our city back on its feet. And then we have to try to include more people in the recovery. I'm championing an anti-poverty platform that includes cash relief, high-speed internet, and basic financial services to more New Yorkers. And your organization and your members are the lifeblood of so many of our institutions. You work in schools. I'm a public school parent. I've got a child that is likely benefiting from your members' work every single day. There's not going to be a city recovery if we don't take care of our people, and I know that's what you all are fighting for every day. I want to fight alongside you.
Thank you. I think one question I know I've asked every candidate, and this may not apply to you, it may apply to you, but as of your last campaign filing, how much do you have on hand for your campaign?
Oh, sure, that applies to me, Greg. We just filed in March, and the total was, including matching funds, we expect to have $6.5 million. Even though, frankly, that filing was of less than 2 months. We have twice as many individual donors as I think any other candidate. And we've raised some more money since that filing. Okay. Whatever the maximum spending limit is, we're going to have it.
All right.
If it's 7.2, we're obviously there. If it's 10.9, we're going to be there.
Okay, fair enough. And we have a few questions for you. We have our first presenter.
Good morning, Candidate Yang. My name is Lawrence Bosley. I'm one of the senior counsels at Local 237. My question is, clearly there's been a nationwide outrage to what appears to be escalating incidents of police brutality, which in turn has sparked calls for defunding the police. Those calls have also been echoed here in New York as well. As a result of those calls from activists, Mayor Bill de Blasio, many members of the city council, and public advocate Juani Williams are pushing to pass legislation that would transfer school safety agents back to the New York City Department of Education, which the last time school safety was under the control of the New York City Department of Education, it was a disaster for numerous reasons, hence their current control under the NYPD. Additionally, some activists and city council members are calling for a complete removal of school safety agents from the public schools. The safety agents in this city are made up of approximately 90% minorities, of which 70% are women of color who live in or near the neighborhoods of the schools they work at. They are familiar with the students and the students' parents, and the parents of the students, roughly 20,000 of them have signed petitions to keep the school safety agents in the schools. The school safety agents are in fact unarmed civilians, not police officers. They do not suspend students, principals, or their designees do. Teachers are both by rule and by encouragement from their union not to intervene in students' fights. So it's hard to see who would do that work if school safety agents were removed from the schools. We are living in precarious and volatile times, and fortunately there have been no Columbine or Sandy Hook type incidents in New York City public schools. And a large part of that fact should be credited to the work of school safety agents. They have confiscated numerous weapons that would otherwise have entered our schools, from razor blades to guns. And as well, they keep intruders out of the school buildings and away from the school grounds. Now, in light of the facts that I've just outlined, how will you, if elected mayor, solve the difficult and nuanced issue of protecting our 1.1 million students, the teachers, the administrators, and the staff who work in the approximately 1,700 buildings that comprise our New York City public schools? And how do you anticipate resolving the issue of which agency will control the 500 plus school safety agents, or will you opt to disband them all together? And if so, what would you do with them?
Thank you for the question, Lawrence. I think that this question actually hits on why I believe I'm the right person to be the next mayor of New York City. So you have various political calls, and the civil rights abuses of Black people by police officers around the country are very real. But then does it make sense that to change the practices within our schools if frankly, there aren't parents, teachers, and school administrators calling for it? Those are the people that I'm listening to. It's that, like the people that are going to understand what's going on within that school building are the people that work there every single day. So if principals and teachers were to be saying, look, these school safety officers are somehow not contributing positively, I would listen. If it's anyone outside of that building, I frankly think that they are expressing a political point of view and a set of passions that I respect, but that's not the kind of thing that should be driving policy decisions in that way. I have not heard of negative occurrences that have to do with school safety officers, but what I have heard is frankly like a lack of negative things happening, in part probably because the school safety officers are keeping them from happening by as you're describing, getting a weapon out of a teenager's hands, frankly, before it makes the news. So that's the way I see things. I'm a very data-driven, results-oriented person, and I want to listen to the people who are closest to the action, in this case, closest to our kids, closest to the school buildings. I'm not someone who's going to be swayed by the Twitter cause of the day or the political wins. I think that is one frustration that a lot of people have with the current mayor, is that when things get tough, he'll back down or just look around and say okay, what do I need to do to make people like me again? And it's one reason why, frankly, more and more people don't like him. You know what I mean? You have to listen to the folks on the ground and do what you think is right. And then if someone's upset about it, it's New York. You expect someone to be upset about it. All right, that was a little bit probably, that gives you a sense of my stance on this.
No, you were on target. New
Yeah,
York
no,
City.
I'm all set. If the teachers and administrators don't have, aren't up in arms, then then I don't see a reason to change.
You know, I think I think you're the only one that ever said that publicly, or just said it. Period. That you don't hear the teachers and principals or even the parents calling for this.
No, I don't.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I will say, and something I've said in public, which you probably would all agree with, is like, do we also need more guidance counselors and mental health workers? And the rest of it, like, of course, but like, but this isn't like a zero sum thing. I mean, the fact is, our kids like our kids need more of a lot of things. But in this, like here and now, like again, the administrators and teachers know what's best.
Right. Okay. We have a second presenter.
Yes, Mr. Yang, thank you for taking my question. My name is Ruben Torres, member of Teamsters Local 237. And my question has to do with public housing. New York City has some of the oldest public housing buildings in the nation. The dire need for capital repairs has led previous administrations to come up with plans that involve private developers. New York City Housing Authority residents are concerned about gentrification, and for Local 237 members, privatization could lead to job losses, relocations, and other labor concerns. A new plan called the Blueprint for Change, which follows a public-private partnership based on a model used in Cambridge, Massachusetts, is currently being advanced by the NYCHA CEO and chair, Greg Ross. What's your opinion of this plan, if you know about it? And two, do you have any other plan for the New York City Housing Authority residents and employees?
Thank you, Ruben. It's shameful that New York City may be one of the worst landlords in New York City. Like we have hundreds of thousands of folks living in NYCHA housing that have gone without heat during the winter, that have leaks that haven't been repaired in months and months. And we need to invest billions of dollars in upgrading and modernizing NYCHA. So when you ask about my plans, I believe that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to get federal dollars to help modernize and rebuild NYCHA and do it in a way that will not just improve people's way of life, but would create, in this case, tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of jobs over a number of years. So big picture, the economy is still very badly wounded. The federal government put up $1.9 trillion in the American Rescue Plan. And then what they tell me their next move is going to be infrastructure. They're saying they're going to put hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure. And I'm going to suggest that the first place we should be rebuilding New York's infrastructure is public housing, because the need is so great. The resources, frankly, can only come from the federal government at this level because you have like an infrastructure debt of like about $30 to $40 billion. I've called for $48 billion. If you can imagine what $48 billion would do in NYCHA, I mean, it's a lot. It's like, it's almost hard to, conceive of what that money is. Now, the concern about public-private partnerships is born of this ongoing mistrust where NYCHA residents don't feel like they have control of their own destiny. People are always proposing plans. One of my proposals where NYCHA is concerned is to actually have NYCHA tenants and tenant representatives as a majority of the board of NYCHA. And if you think about this for a second, who does NYCHA work for? Who does NYCHA represent? It's literally public housing. Like we literally should be working for the public, which in this case should be the people that live there. Because who should have a higher stake in what happens in NYCHA developments than the folks that live there? It's like, imagine living in your own home and then not being able to say what happens in your home. That's what's happening right now. So if you have these public-private plans, the concerns that people are going to get somehow priced or pushed out of their own homes, like, needs to be addressed by having folks, frankly, control the board. Because then they can go through the plans in detail, and then they can say to their people what they mean. Right now, it does not matter what we say to the people who live in NYCHA because they're not going to believe us anyway. You know what I mean? Like they're just like used to, being sold and pitched things, and there's not any trust there. The only people that they will trust are the folks that they know have been fighting for their rights for years and decades. We have to empower those people to control the board, and then if we can present to those people, like, look, this is going to be good for NYCHA housing, then you can get the residents to trust again. But you have to precede that by giving the tenants genuine power. And if we do change the board in this way, I'm going to go to them and say, look, I've got billions of dollars from the feds. Here's what we want to do with it. It's going to create this many jobs, and it's going to make it so that your kids actually, are in a healthier, more sustainable environment. They'll get skills, but it's going to be up to them to approve my plan, frankly.
Okay. And we have a third presenter.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Yang. How are you?
Hey, Mary. How are you?
Good. I'm the director. I work at Local 237. I'm director of the Legal Services Plan. We represent members in their private legal matters as part of their benefit package. My question surrounds the pandemic and the New York City recovery, which you mentioned a bit in your opening statement. We now have unemployment at record high, businesses, Broadway, healthcare, the housing market, all in turmoil. Can you speak to some specifics about your short and long-term plans for recovery in New York City?
I would be happy to, Mary, because this is, to me, mission critical. Like, if you can't get our economy back on its feet, like, we can't get anything done. And frankly, the pressures on your members will just go up and up and up. So we're missing 84% of commuters. And I was just with a food truck operator in the Bronx, and he talked about how when the train stopped before, he would get ready for a rush of orders because he'd have a bunch of customers. And now he says, like, he doesn't even notice when the train comes because there are no customers. So how do you get the commuters back? Number one is the vaccine needs to be broadly distributed to people so that CEOs can say to their workers, come back to the office. Now, there are things the city can do to facilitate this, and I'll give you a couple of examples. One is a passport on your phone saying you've been vaccinated, that you could then use to increase confidence so that people can convene in a theater, an office building, a bar and restaurant. Other countries are already doing this, and they found it to be very useful. Number two is we have to recognize that a lot of people have changed their behaviors in a way that's going to make them snapping back into commuting patterns difficult. So I'm recommending that we actually give away like New York City gift certificates to anyone who's commuting into the city 5 days a week, like $50 to like any bar or restaurant, and then they can get together with friends. Like, frankly, like, our businesses need the boost anyway. And then they can just redeem it with the city. They're going to end up spending more than $50 anyway. We have to actually start competing. I recommended a subway fare holiday the week of Memorial Day for the same reason. Subway ridership is down 70%. People don't think the subway is safe, which, I ride the subway all the time. It's fine. So if you were a business and your business was down 70%, you might run a promotion. And then if you run this promotion, then you'd have people who are outside the city say it's the beginning of summer, subway is free, maybe I'll come in from Jersey, or I'll come in from Long Island, and then I'll use the free subway to visit various neighborhoods, and by the way, I'll spend money, and then I'll take pictures, and those pictures will go out on social media, which leads to the second thing, is that we're missing 60 million tourists who supported 300,000 jobs. And so you know what those jobs are. It's all the restaurants, bars, bus tour operators, everyone else. So the goal has to be to send a very clear message that New York City is open for tourism. I've already committed to having the country's largest post-COVID comeback celebration in all 5 boroughs, concerts, where we can frankly replace the images people have right now of New York City of people banging in pots and pans with thousands of people celebrating. And then they'll see their friends are in New York City, and then they'll say, wait, like, I can go back to New York City, like, it's safe again. But we're going to have to invest in a real way that we haven't before. It's incredible. We got 60 million tourists. Do you know how much New York City was investing in tourism pre-COVID. No one knows this. It's fine. We were investing $40 million for 60 million tourists. It's like, if you understand what that would mean, it's like we were investing at a very, very trivial level because we didn't have to. Everyone was coming to New York City naturally. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to up our investment in reviving those flows of tourism as quickly as possible. Right now, 80 to 90% of our hotels are empty. Some of them are being sold and repurposed. You cannot overstate the gravity of the economic catastrophe here in New York City. And spurring the revival is actually one of the main things I'm focused on. Now, the thing I do have to mention is that for small businesses, we're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. And then we need to get it into the hands of those small businesses and in some cases their landlords so that businesses have a chance to reopen. I'm going to have a czar of small business recovery. We're going to go to each individual storefront, restaurant, and bar. And if they're trying to reopen, we're going to say to them, what do you need? We're going to waive all fines and permitting fees because we have to get out of your way. And then I've committed $100 million to a People's Bank that's going to invest in getting some of these stores back open. But this is what I'm all about, Mary. I'm sorry I'm being a bit long-winded, but I wanted to get very specific and tactical because this is something that I believe most of the other candidates do not understand. They see everything as a political problem. This is not a political problem. Like, missing 60 million tourists is not a political problem. It's an economic and operational problem. And so you have to invest operationally. And I believe I'm the best person to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And can we have closing remarks?
Oh, wow, this was so brief. I really enjoyed it. You all have been fighting for the livelihoods and rights of tens of thousands of people for years, hundreds of thousands maybe, I mean nationally for sure. So many people have benefited from your work, but so much of your work, frankly, assumes a particular type of economy and climate, where like New York City has had a thriving economy for years and years, and so the goal has been to bargain for your fair share. Right now, we're in a very different situation. The outflows are very real. 300,000 people have left New York City. One person told me that our school system has lost 200,000 children. It's gone from 1.1 million kids to 900,000 kids, which shocked me, but then it made sense to me because if you lose 300,000 families, some of them have children. So the next mayor is going to need to do a couple things at once. They're actually going to need to do more like 30 things at once. But they need to activate the private sector and philanthropy and even technology to try and speed up the recovery. And then they need to efficiently deploy the city's resources and federal aid for maximal impact in order for your workers to be secure in their livelihoods. I believe I am the best candidate to do this. I do not think that the other candidates understand how to, frankly, reach beyond government. Whereas I've had conversations with a number of companies and CEOs that are ready to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in New York City if they have a partner in City Hall. They do not see the majority of the candidates in the field as that partner, but they have said to me, if you win this thing, we will invest. Like, that's the kind of leadership we're going to need. We need to get the agencies working, but we also need people to believe in New York City as a place to build their organizations, their companies, and hire. And I am that candidate. I am the candidate that can speed up our recovery.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate the heck out of you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for participating. For those who don't know you, the few people, can you give us your history and tell us why you're running for mayor of New York City?
Sure. Well, today happens to be my 67th birthday. And for those of you who have followed my exploits over the years, you know the over-under point spread was I shouldn't be alive today. Actually been in the streets of New York City and the subway, leading the Guardian Angels for 42 years, expanding their efforts into 13 countries, 130 cities. And more than just leading the ideology of people coming together, black, whites, Hispanics, Asians, and reclaiming their neighborhoods and taking an interest in public safety, it's also been an empowerment tool that has been led by myself in the streets. So I've been shot 5 times on the orders of organized crime, John Gotti, to the Gambinos. I've certainly had my fair share of street battles in terms of having the gang problem, which has afflicted the schools where many of your security officers are, and the public housing projects where I've run into your members and helped to put that, at least calm that down. And more importantly, been able to rescue a lot of young men and women, particularly from the inner cities, who might easily have fallen into the trap of getting involved in the horrific violence that we see now rising in the streets. What a lot of people don't know about my background is I came out of a union household. My father, Chester, 55 years, a merchant seaman, member of the National Maritime Union. I remember at a time when there was no Verrazano Bridge, we would pick him up when he would come into port through the Straits of the Verrazano, through the Arctic Kill, the Kilvan Cull, into Staten Island, into the port of Newark and Elizabeth. And I would meet members of the Longshoremen's Union, the Teamsters Union, the truckers. And I remember the kind of solidarity they had at a time where nobody crossed the picket line. So if one particular union was on strike, let's say in this case my father with the National Maritime Union, the strike was honored by the longshoremen, honored by the Teamsters. I realized that kind of solidarity in many instances is no longer honored. But I saw exactly how the men and women operated back then, and how it was so important for them to be unified, to have any opportunity whatsoever to be able to make a difference in the quality of life that their families were having, and obviously the strength of their union. I remember going down to what is the old St. Vincent's, which was National Maritime Union headquarters, and seeing my father, a boatswain, shape up for work. And I would actually pray that he wouldn't be chosen, because that would mean he'd be out 6 or 8 months at sea and not be able to stay at home with us in Canarsie. So I want to be specific in terms of what I've experienced with your members. Some in NYCHA, some in the hospital, municipal hospital situation, but most in the schools, the over 1,700 public schools in the city of New York. I can't claim that I've been into all of them, but I've been into quite a few over the years. And I remember the school safety program when it was under the old Board of Education, complete disaster. Absolutely. And it was upgraded when it was put under the supervision of the NYPD. And obviously the uniform structure, the structure of how security was carried out in the schools. And with the 5,000 security agents that you have that are under attack by so many different forces who have never been in the schools, who have absolutely no idea of what the women and men of your particular union have to go through on a daily basis. Now they not only want to revert to having security go back to the old Board of Education, now the Department of Education. They want to take it away from the supervision of the NYPD, and they want to endanger your membership even more. The lunacy of Brad Lander over my dead body, who wants to become the next controller of the city of New York, who wants to strip your agents of all their authority, wants to remove metal detectors, basically wants a turnstile system of students coming in and out. In many instances, it could be a threat to the teachers, to the other staff members, to the security themselves, and to the visitors. Makes no sense. They're not removing metal detectors from JFK or LaGuardia or Madison Square Garden or Citi Field or Yankee Stadium or other places, but he wants to remove the metal detectors and the security officers from the school system. And then the king of it all is Jumaane Williams, the public advocate. I don't know how many of you know that Jumaane Williams himself wants to defund the police, defund prisons, and basically neuter your security officers, has 24-hour police protection, armed NYPD security officers constantly protecting him, driving the taxpayer-funded SUV. And I don't know if you're aware, he resides in the active military garrison of Fort Hamilton. He lives on the base, which means every night after his duties as public advocate, he's got to show identification to the military police in order to enter that facility, which is where he is housed. Now, I would say to the Brad Landers of the world who wants to be a controller, who like Scott Stringer has 24-hour NYPD security officers at his beck and call, to Jumaane Williams, that if you want to defund the police, if you want to remove security from the schools or neuter them, remove the machines, the metal detectors, well, then why don't you strip yourself of your armed NYPD security officers? Why don't you live out there in the real world like everyone else, like your security officers, like I do here on 87th off Columbus in a 320 square foot apartment with my wife, 12 rescue cats. And if you notice, I walk the streets of New York City all the time, and I've accumulated quite a few enemies in my lifetime, but I don't have armed security, and I don't intend to have armed security provided by the NYPD when I'm elected mayor. But what I will do is I will be an advocate for the public safety officers in the school system. They need to even be more enhanced. They need to be even more supported. They need to remain under the supervision of the NYPD to not only maintain their effectiveness, but to be able to protect everyone in this massive school system, which has close to 1 million students, and obviously many teachers, administrators, and those who work in the system. I mean, that's a population that is more than most large major cities across America. And we're dependent on the security officers there, most of whom are minorities, 70% who are women. And it's like these elected officials have no understanding whatsoever of what goes on behind the doors of a public school at the beginning of the day and after the school day and out in the surrounding neighborhoods where I've seen many of the public school officers escorting the children to make sure that they stay out of harm's way. So you'll know that you have a friend in Mayor Curtis Sliwa. And most importantly, you'll have a guy who's from the city. If there's anything that others will say, even those who disagree with my ideology or my stances on different issues, is that Curtis Sliwa is New York. You cut my veins and arteries, and I bleed New York City. I've been in most of the neighborhoods. I've been in most of the places where many of the other candidates either haven't had the time to go, or maybe they haven't been here all that long in New York City, or they have no desire to go. And with a wealth of experiences, I think I can relate to the average man and average woman out there, particularly your union members. And I want to finish with this final story. All three of my sons go to the public school system. My oldest son, Anthony, who's 17, goes to high school. My middle son, who is Carter, goes to junior high school. And my youngest son, Hunter, goes to elementary school. I remember going to PS 144 in Forest Hills, Queens for Hunter's moving up ceremony, when all the parents and their guardians or their grandparents had to be checked out first by the security officer at the front desk. There was a guy there who clearly had had a court order to stay away from that school. And I watched very depthly how the female security officer used a lot of her psychology to convince that man to come with her over to the office to deal with the assistant principal so that he could be gracefully removed from the premises without causing a lot of problems with the other parents, without him all of a sudden getting belligerent and maybe starting a major problem there before that moving up ceremony. I've seen the men and women in their uniforms. I've seen them perform in the schools. I've seen them perform outside the schools. And I am intent at not only maintaining the program as it exists, but to the Brad Landers and to the Jumaane Williams and the others who want to strip your men and women of their authority, their ability to do the job, and endanger them and everyone that they are responsible to keep safe and secure. I will be their worst nightmare, because I will challenge them. What schools are you talking about? When have you been there? Do you have children in the public school system? I have a number of Guardian Angel alumni who are proud security officers, members of your union, who each and every day go to work understanding the importance of their mission, And I will carry that mission on to the citizens of New York City because, as you know, wherever the mayor goes, the cameras and the press will follow. And when I visit the schools, of which I intend to do, elementary, junior high school, of which I've attended, when I grew up in Canarsie, Brooklyn, the first people that I will thank are the security officers who each and every day keep everyone inside that school and in the surrounding area safe and secure.
Thank you. And we have a few questions for you, and I think you may have answered all of them, but we have them anyway. First question.
Good morning, Mr. Sliwa. How are you? My name is Frank Rella. I'm with Local 237. I'm one of the business agents. I represent school safety. Also, my background, to be fair, I am an ex-school safety agent, and I have family member in school safety. And it seems like you're very up on the topic, and you answered most of what I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. With the nationwide reaction to defund the police, as we know, the city council, the mayor, and the public advocate, Mr. Williams, is pushing for legislation to transfer them out of the Board of Ed, which you've touched on. And it seems like they eventually want to remove them completely from NYP, from the schools themselves. We know that there's over 5,000 school safety agents. 90% of them are people of color. And as you stated yourself, 70% are women. They live in the communities that they work. Not only are they school safety, but as you touched on, they are advocates for these kids. They have programs like we've got Rhythm. They do an autism program, the Explorers program. When there was shootings, such as the Grant Street shootings, they ran out there with the West Side terrorists. They grabbed kids and brought them back inside. And they protected these children for hours and hours while everybody's trying to figure out what was going on. So what it comes to you is we're trying to figure out, what are you going to do? What do you see as a solution to protecting the over a million students and teachers and other personnel, while also restoring the good name of the school safety agents who have been basically demonized and demoralized by the city council and by Mr. Williams himself?
Number one, you have to put these men and women, your security agents, your union members, on a pedestal. You got to allow people to know all the great work that they do, because clearly the only time you generally hear about security officers if they themselves are entangled in some kind of a personal issue, like anyone in uniform, like the police officers, correctional officers, guardian angels, whomever. Occasionally you hear about their good deeds. But again, the mayor can steer so much attention. Have award ceremonies. Be there. Point out how these men and women, some of them single parents raising children themselves who have to go to those same public schools, are doing an exemplary job, and cite their heroism, coming to the rescue of others and mentoring, especially the mentoring part. A mayor can do that and definitely take on their many adversaries. Number one, I believe we need to refund the police. I certainly, in my first 13 years of organizing the Guardian Angels, personally experienced the adversarial role that police could play. I got locked up 76 times. I got wooden shampoos, concrete facials, attitudinal readjustment. I was locked up in the Brooklyn House, Bronx House, Queens House, the Tombs, Rikers Island. So when all of these elected officials talk about what it's like to be on the inside, I've been on the inside, I've been on the outside. But in the 2 times I was attacked and my life was almost sacrificed in the process, 911 was called. Had they not responded to those situations, I would be dead on arrival. Subsequently, in 1993, when Rudy Giuliani was elected mayor, he said, look, stop this nonsense. Embrace the Guardian Angels. They're volunteers who are helping our city, and we've never had a problem since. So I would be in the forefront of refunding the police, taking on their adversaries, not defunding prisons, because this no bail system is a complete disaster. And that's not to suggest there shouldn't be no bail. The Jersey measure is working a lot better than our measure. They were added 2 years before us. But Cuomo and the state legislature was so pretentious, they're so omnipotent, they're smarter than everyone else, that they couldn't actually study the Jersey program to see, wow, that's working relatively well, because there the judges had the jurisdiction to make determinations. Is the suspect a flight risk? Is he or she a danger to themselves? Are they a danger to the overall community? And that's a fair, square way of dealing with things. But you know you'll have a friend in City Hall. And again, I will take it right to the adversaries. Do your children go to public schools? When's the last time you went to public school? Oh, you went to Brooklyn Tech. Oh, an elite public high school. So you weren't in Wingate High School, right? You weren't in a number of other schools, poor performing schools, where there are all kinds of social problems, fights, gangs, and such. So now you're speaking really not of your own experience, but what you think should be done as opposed to having boots on the ground and knowing. I'll invite them to accompany me into the schools. But I will tell you this, every chance I get, and not just for the public safety officers in the public school system, but especially correctional officers who themselves are constantly under attack, constantly misunderstood, police and other security agents of the city. I'll make sure I'm there to pat them on the back so hard they've got to get a chiropractic adjustment from all the love and support they're going to get from this mayor.
Okay. Thank you. And we have a second question.
Should have Chevelle, I believe. Yours,
Chevelle?
okay.
Chevelle? You're muted, Chevelle. Okay, Chevelle. Chevelle? Okay, we have the third question.
Well, Curtis, this is Mr. Arnold from 237, board member, been a member of 237 for 7 years. Here's my question to you. It's been 30 years, the first recorded death in New York City due to COVID-19, with 30,000 more deaths that followed, with unemployment at a record high, businesses shut down, Broadway shut down, healthcare and the housing market all in turmoil. What is your short-term and long-term plan for recovery for New York City?
And short-term plan is we've got to open up the city of New York. We look at large cities around America, they're fully moving ahead at a much faster and rapid rate. Clearly, we have a problem of Cuomo not communicating with de Blasio and vice versa. You know, it's sort of like two bulls there, you know, just rubbing shoulders, and the people and the business community and others are suffering as a result. We have a situation that nobody's addressing. Tourism coming back to New York City. We know that the epicenter of tourism, where most of the tourists go, is Times Square. How are they going to stay in those hotels where like 90% of those hotels are not now occupied by the homeless men and homeless women that have been moved shelters into those hotels? It's not going to be easy to get them back to the shelters because legal aid and other legal entities are going to go into court and challenge and claim that they have tenants' rights and that they'll be emotionally traumatized, and that could extend a long period of legal challenges before the men and women can be returned to the shelters from which they were moved at the beginning of the pandemic. So there are a lot of measures that have to be taken. And I hear some of the other mayoral candidates, some of them have pretty good ideas. I'm not going to be one to declare to be so pretentious that I know it all. I'm going to fill the room up. I'm going to say, hey, look, you know what my strengths are. I know the streets. I know the communities. I know public safety. When it comes to sort of turbocharging our economy, getting the tourists back, and putting the sales tax into the coffers and helping both tenants and landlords equally, I'm going to need a lot of advice, a lot of help from the people that are on that business. The same way I would reach out to your union when it's a public safety union involving your members in the school system, or NYCHA, or the City University of New York, or the other entities where I've ran across them recently in Jacob Javits Center. And I would have to ask for your input along with everybody else's input and then finally come to a decision. So I don't think there is anyone who knows exactly what to do. We've never been hit with a pandemic, fiscal malaise, and a rapid increase in violent crime all simultaneously. So we're going to have to bring the experts together. We're going to have to put together a program. But I will tell you this, if we don't get those homeless men and women out of these hotels where the tourists stay, how are the tourists ever to come back to New York City and start enjoying our city? Even if the cultural and entertainment centers are opened up, even if the bars and restaurants are opened up, the retail establishments, we've got to be able to do that. Or if we don't deal with the public safety and we don't deal with how to house the homeless and the emotionally disturbed, we're never, ever going to get back to where we need to be.
Curtis, I'd like to thank you for taking my question and joining our forum.
Thank you. And
my pleasure.
I believe we have Chevelle. Chevelle?
Hey, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Sliwa. How are you? Happy birthday.
I couldn't be better. I'm 67 and nobody ever thought I'd be alive.
Right, that's a blessing.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So my name is Chevelle Knox. I'm a business agent for Local 237. I represent, New York City Housing Authority workers. So my question for you will be centered around that. So a lot of us know that NYCHA buildings are aging. They're old. We have some of the oldest buildings in the nation. And I'm going to say past administrations, they'll have these plans and everything, these good ideas, and then when they get in and they see that the needs for the repairs are so dire and the amount of capital that it'll take, then their plans start to point towards privatization. Now, privatization, that's something that causes panic, that causes, worry, fear, especially with our residents and our employees. Our residents, when they hear privatization, they hear gentrification and being pushed out. Our employees worry about losing their jobs, right? There is a new plan. It's called the Blueprint for Change, and it puts together it's a partnership between private and public, right? So that plan is currently being advanced by the current chair of NYCHA, Greg Russ. So I wanted to know what you thought about the Blueprint for Change, and also, did you have any plans for NYCHA?
Well, probably more so than most of the candidates. Not all the candidates, because I know some have been in the NYCHA housing developments. I've been in so many of them over the years. I lived in Brownsville for a while, Osborne and Hegeman. So I was in most of the 18 developments in Brownsville, which I believe per capita, per person, has more public housing than any other part of the city. Also been in the housing developments in East New York. I've seen along the East River alone, Astoria projects, Ravenswood, the largest, Queensbridge. Oh boy, that's property the developers are salivating over. It's right on the East River. And then when you get into the lower end of Manhattan, before you hit the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, you have all the public housing developments here. The developers are salivating. I actually believe, and again, I don't have all the answers, and nobody does, because we know the federal government doesn't want to deal with this. They provide 95% of the funding for NYCHA. We saw Dr. Carson. He was like Pontius Pilate. He didn't want to deal with it. De Blasio, who has knowledge of public housing, when he was executive director for Cuomo, who was the head of HUD, they don't want to deal with it. They would much rather this problem just go away. I believe that Jack Kemp, many years ago, who was the secretary of HUD under Reagan, although the Republicans themselves turned on this idea, said, look, let's create a way for minimal investment. We're not talking a lot of money, like a condo or a co-op. But they're NYCHA residents, many of whom pay rent. A lot of people don't know. NYCHA residents, a lot of them pay rent. They think, they're all subsidized. They all live there freely. That they be able to buy their apartments, even with minimal contributions. Not at anywhere near what we see at, the high rises of Manhattan, the co-ops and condos. And then you create within the complex itself the vocational training so that the men and women can actually develop the skills to become the union carpenters, electricians, plumbers, heating, maintenance, boiler improvement. I mean, boilers alone and have them living on the property in a form of sweat equity, the way a superintendent would live in a private dwelling and he or she, they receive an apartment in return for doing services. I think a lot more of that would go a long way to repairing what is. And then there's got to be a comprehensive plan to figure out what are we going to do in the future? Because I understand what the private-public partnerships are, but we can't squeeze out the people who live in NYCHA and the workers who already work in NYCHA who are doing a good job. They just never get the attention and recognition. And again, it's mayor. I'm not afraid to visit a NYCHA development, even if I go there on my own. We'll have award ceremonies. We'll have recognitions. I know in the summer times you have family days in all the developments. That would be a perfect time to put all of those people who live and work in those developments and contribute to the great quality of life that we all take for granted and give them awards. People need a pat on the back. They don't do it. The governor doesn't do it. The mayor doesn't do it, even though they should know better because they were involved in HUD. Now, do I believe this will work? I'm willing to give it a try, and I'm willing to accept anybody else's ideas and try to incorporate it, because really, if any answer existed that could improve the NYCHA situation now and in the future, now we can't even deliver basic services sometimes. I haven't heard anybody come up with anything that's a working pilot, but I do believe that you start bringing all these programs together. You could use one development to try one idea, another development, as long as the tenants bought into it, to try another idea. Maybe Marcy Projects will try this concept. Maybe Queensbridge will try this complex. Or Queensbridge is divided into two. So they'll do one in one part of Queensbridge, another in another part of Queensbridge, and then we'll see what the results are. But if anybody says that they have an answer to NYCHA, Dr. Carson didn't, Blasio didn't, Cuomo didn't, Curtis Sliwa will try, but I tell you this much, having been in NYCHA as much as I have been over the years, I'm going to try again. I'm not going to abandon ship like Carson, Cuomo, and de Blasio have done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Curtis. Can you give us your closing remarks?
Sure. I think because of what has happened in our country, the moment that somebody sees a candidate who is running as a Republican, they put window shades on their eyes, they put cotton balls in their ears, they put a zipper on their mouth. They're thinking, oh, my God, it's January 6th. Certainly, I'm not that kind of a Republican. I was the chairman of the New York State Reform Party for many years, in which I was endorsing Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and some of our own candidates. I'm a Republican when Andrew Cuomo decided to eliminate third parties. Remember, in his battle against the Working Families Party, of which he failed, he only empowered them more. There are now only two existing third parties, the Conservative Party and the Working Families Party. The Independence Party is gone. The Reform Party is gone. The Green Party is gone. All the other third parties are gone, the Libertarians. Shame on Cuomo for doing that. But I felt with the problems of law and order and the move to defund the police, defund prisons, and forget all about public safety, that this would be the right track for me. So, look, I have problems with Republicans because I'm not their kind of Republican. But I think many of them recognize that I can make inroads into every community of New York City because of my 42-year track record. One thing I can assure your union and its members, that I've been there with you before, seen what you've had to go through, and I'm going to be listening to all of you without wax in my ears. You know how some of these politicians, they patronize you. They say, yeah, Greg, yeah. Please endorse me. And then all of a sudden they introduce you to Mr. Click. When you need them, they're not there. I'll be there. And I'll be there live and in person for your members. And when I can't do something, at least I'll be honest enough to tell you, woman to man, I can't do this now. Maybe we can do it in the future if we work on it together.
Thank you. We appreciate your participation and we appreciate your honesty and sincerity. Thank you. If anybody can say two things about Curtis Sliwa, we could say you've been sincere and you've been honest. We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, we need honesty in City Hall. We haven't had it in a month of Sundays. Thank you. Thank you for permitting me to speak to all of you on my birthday.
Happy birthday. Enjoy your birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we will have a lot of discussion over the next month to come to a decision on who we're going to endorse. And I look forward to hearing from a lot of you what you thought you heard and what you think we should do moving forward. Appreciate it. Thank you.